Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just testing something here. So I hope that
Good afternoon, everyone. Good
so
afternoon,
we are all right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am testing something here. So if you would hear some some background noise, I'm just trying to fix something, and I will try to share this to you. I'm using a software that will remove the background noise. Even if you're not using an earphones or or if you are in a noisy environment. So I hope, yeah, I'm starting a little bit earlier, but we will start with in around 3 p.m. We will start with the discussion at 3 p.m. I'm just trying to do something else, an experiment right now, right? So I am trying to set up my Zoom live in YouTube. So I'm using Zoom to live stream in YouTube, and I am using Crisp. So later on, after our workshop, I will go to Facebook and then share to you what I am using. It's a software that uses an artificial intelligence thing that removes the background noise. And I think it's working. I don't know if it's working. For those who are online right now, can you tell me if you hear some background noise, like children speaking or maybe children running? Could you just tell me in the chat if you can hear any background noise? My aircon is also on, and it has a little noise coming out from it. So tell me if you can hear. Sounds good. Hi Ken, that's Ken. No children. All right. Yeah. So I'm using Crisp, KRISP. All right. Thank you, Ken. Ken is a friend of mine. So shout out to Ken. He's based in Malaysia, and he is with us right now. None, sir. It is loud and clear. Okay, that's good. I'll be sharing this to you. Okay. So before I start, I'm just gonna just prepare something that's gonna turn off. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fourth episode for the Empower Ed Edu Lecture Series. It's now episode 4, and episode 4 will talk about one important thing that we need to consider. I think this is the first thing that we need to consider as we do online distance learning or distance education at this time of the pandemic. So, good afternoon to everyone. Just a good shout out, a short shout out with everyone who's been here. Thank you so much. I see familiar faces, so that means this have been the most loyal viewers and subscribers of Empower Ed. Thank you so much for all your support. Um, so can you make a shout out? So we have a friend of mine from Malaysia, Ken Morrison, who's here with us. Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for being here. We have a viewer who's been with us for even with the first episode. It's Pik Chung. I don't know if that's a correct pronunciation. I'm sorry if it's a wrong. I pronounced your name incorrectly, but Pik Chung from Cambodia is here with us. And of course, we have friends in Metro Manila. We have friends coming from Dipolog City, from Mindanao, and then up north in Ilocos Norte, in Angeles City, in Abra. We have someone from Masbate here. So we're going all around. We're going full Philippines right now, and a few friends from outside the Philippines. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Just a note also for those who have attended or viewed and participated our Edu lecture episode number 3, all of the certificates should have been emailed to you. If you have not received your certificate, that means that the email that you have put in the evaluation or the feedback form might have been incorrectly misspelled. So please make sure that you send us a message through the Empower Ed Facebook. Let us know if you did not receive it yet. Or better yet, you can do another evaluation. You just type in correctly your name so that you'll be able to receive your certificate. So again, all Empower Ed Edu Lecture number 3 certificates have been distributed or sent via your email. So there, thank you so much. If you have received it, you're welcome. Some of you are saying thank you. You're welcome. Just make sure that you check your email if you put in your name properly and then your email spelled it correctly, because that's the one that the system will be using to give your certificate. All right, so thank you so much for being here. I think we are now ready, so I'm gonna share my slides now. So I hope that you are able to see my slide. Let me just play it. All right. So welcome to Empower Ed, episode number 4. It's our fourth Edu Lecture series, and for our Edu Lecture episode today, I want to focus on building relationship and supporting social emotional learning in distance learners, or for our students or learners in distance education. I remember a couple of months ago, we had a panel on online learning and teaching, and someone asked about what's the best platform. Of course, we were talking about technology for distance education or for distance learning, and of course, my panel, the other members of the panel gave wonderful answers. They're more experts because they're IT experts, so they're better. They have better knowledge on IT than I have. But suddenly, because out of my own experience also, when they asked me about when it was my turn to share about what I think was the best platform in distance learning or online learning, I told everyone that um, in the end, the best platform or the best connection that we could have with our student is actually it's our relationship. So the best platform is the relationship that we have with our students. So the best platform in learning and teaching is actually the relationship platform, quote and unquote. And right now, I will be taking this time to really focus on what I have been talking about for the past couple of weeks. If you've heard me in the different online sessions that I have been giving, or online webinar sessions that I have been giving, I've always focused on what I think is the priority right now. We've written an article, a report, independent report to UNESCO and Education International, and there my co-authors and I presented the idea that we must have Maslow before Bloom. Let's talk about Maslow before Bloom later on. But what I'm proposing again at this time around is it's not just Maslow before Bloom, it's also Maslow and Bloom. So as we start our discussion right now, um, as we start the new school year, my school just started our new school year, so we have done online distance learning. And I am just very happy and proud to say that we have survived our first week of online distance learning, and And it's been a struggle. Really, we wanted to start with building relationships, so we did not start with our lesson immediately. Instead, we have a lot of orientation to our technology platforms. We also conducted some preliminary discussion with our students, debriefing even before we jumped to the lesson. So we did not, while we started with our school year this week in my school, we did not jump to the lessons immediately. Instead, we spent time talking to our students, introducing them to the platforms, introducing them to their classmates, to their teachers, and even to the different processes through which they can be helped to in coping with the pandemic. So next week, that's the time. So in the coming week on Monday, that's the time that we will be starting our lessons, the academic part of the school year. All right. So Maslow before Bloom, my proposition, I will be proposing Maslow and Bloom. And then, of course, the big idea why we want to do Maslow before Bloom or even Maslow and Bloom is, of course, we want to push also that in distance education, when we design our modules, when we design our learning experiences, we don't only focus on the academics, but we also focus on the social emotional learning of the students, the non-academic part. Well, for in the Philippines, it could mean character formation, values formation, and all those kinds of other non-academic things that we have. Okay, so therefore, the second part here is, how do we design for relationships? How do we design for the development of grit, and even for making sure that our students are resilient at this time of the pandemic. Okay, so if you have thoughts right now, if you have insights, please make sure that you comment your insights, that you put in your thoughts or even some questions. Again, I hope to make this discussion in less than an hour so that we can have more time to discuss some of your questions or your thoughts and your insights. So, if you have not heard of this yet in my talk or webinar, please make sure that you take a picture of this or take note of the title of the report that I have co-written with some of my friends from the different countries around the world. It's thinking about pedagogy in an unfolding pandemic. I think this will be a very helpful read to teachers right now, especially as we prepare for the new school year. A lot of us in the Philippines, so for our friends overseas, the Philippines is gearing up for the new school year, which will start in August for most of the schools, but some schools, a few schools like my school, we have started this end of July. So please download this, and we extensively talked about social emotional learning, Maslow before Bloom in this report. Of course, there are pedagogical, there are articles or parts that talk about the pedagogy that we need to understand in terms of instruction and assessment. So you can download this part. But one of the things that we have discussed is we really wanted to know how the students are at this time of the pandemic, and this is a research done in April it's by Active Mind Spring 2020 student survey, and they ask college students how they are. This is a US based study, and we ask our students, the college students, and ask them how they are at this time of the pandemic. This was in April 2020, when we were just experiencing the rise of the COVID pandemic. And right now, we are at the middle of the pandemic. I've heard from the news that in Hong Kong, they already have their third wave. In the Philippines, I don't know where we are right now in terms of wave of the pandemic, but our cases has not been slowing down. Some of the countries were able to flatten their curve, but a lot of countries are still struggling with fighting the pandemic, or halting the increase of the pandemic. But in the big idea here is that, if you look at this chart, you would see that there is a high level of stress and anxiety disappointment or sadness, loneliness or isolation, even financial setbacks for those college students who are working, who are working for, working students. And then even the idea of relocation is affecting them. Relocation means that, I know that I have some students, former students, who are now studying in the United States, and with less announcement, with less heads up to them, they were asked to go home, to vacate the university dorm, and they have to go out of the university. And of course, this my students are foreign students, so they had to come back. They had to buy tickets and come back here in the Philippines before everything was locked down. Remember, we also had lockdowns in the Philippines. And but if you look at this one, we try to look at the level of stress or anxiety, disappointment and sadness, loneliness and isolation as um, the top negative effect of the pandemic in our students. For student self-care, so what are students trying to do to care for themselves at this time of the pandemic? A lot of them try to maintain a routine. We know that as educators, we know that having a routine helps us, gives us a sense of normalcy, right? So even our students, they know that they need to maintain a routine so that they have a sense of what is normal. That everything else, that despite the pandemic, they still see, or they still hope that there is a sense of normalcy in them, or around them. So they also try to get enough physical activity, and they stay connected with others. So when we look at these things, these are the things that students value: maintaining a routine, getting enough physical activity, and even staying connected with others. As we plan for, this is the big question or reflection question that we need to start asking ourselves right now. As we plan for the new school year, are we also planning for this other areas of distance education? Are we thinking about a routine that we will ask our students to, or recommend to our students to follow, so that they have, a sense of what is normal? Are we thinking even of integrating physical activity, even when our students are far away from us? Are we still going to put physical education in the curriculum at this time of the pandemic? Are we ensuring that they will be connected with with some of their peers, of their classmates? This becomes challenging because in the Philippines, we know that we are struggling with access. Not all of our schools will do online distance learning. So even the idea of staying connected with their peers and their classmates becomes a big challenge, especially those who will not do online distance learning. Okay, let's talk about this later on and try to see if there are certain things that we can do so that we can help our students. But again, if you look at the different literature or articles that have been written about the pandemic, a lot of the students right now are feeling of the sense of they have a feeling of boredom and uneasiness, so they're bored, they feel uneasy. Our students have been stuck at home for some months now, and the feeling of boredom. Even for our adults experience the cabin fever for the first time. Like, I've heard that a lot of Filipinos are experiencing symptoms of cabin fever. When we feel bored, there's a sense of uneasiness because we've been stuck in our homes or apartment for a long period of time. Frustration and fear. A lot of us are frustrated with what's happening. Can you imagine our students? They are also scared. They don't know. A lot of our students do not understand, especially for the young ones, what's happening. So there's a high level of anxiety. We feel overwhelmed. We have pandemic anxiety. Some of our students might experience depression and trauma, especially when they know someone, or they have relatives or members of their family who has been affected negatively by the pandemic, whether long-term hospitalization or even death. Right? We need to recognize these things, and we need to know if our students are experiencing this unfortunate situations, or or happenings in their life right now. You know, there's also a study that says because the adults at home feel the negative things, they feel pressured with work, they get frustrated with work. They some adults, some parents have lost their job. So there's this trend that domestic violence and abuse of children at home has increased, right? So UNESCO, for example, reported about this in one of the articles that they have written, and we know that this is a big possibility also, especially when you have the parents getting frustrated with what's happening with their lives and the work, and the kids are there, and of course kids will be kids. So you know, this kinds of everyone in the family at our home feel overwhelmed. So this might lead to these things. Students have they miss the sense of belonging and friendship. If you ask them who they miss, it's their friends at in school. If you ask them what they are missing, it's their classmates that they play with, or friends that they play with and work with in school. So these are the very reality of what our students are experiencing right now. And a lot of the discussions, if you look at the professional development of teachers right now, a lot are focused on preparing the lessons. I, for one, would strongly suggest again that if you are still undergoing professional development in your schools, please ask your school leaders to help you understand what's happening with your students. We should ask for more non-academic focused professional development so that we can better understand what's going on, what's happening with our student at this time of the pandemic. You know, the most vulnerable students are less likely to receive support and extra services that they need right now. So they are the ones who are at risk for falling further behind and becoming isolated with school doors closed. I have a friend, for example, who has been leading a school of indigenous people in Visayas. And you know, a lot of our indigenous children are taking support, or they receive support in terms of the feeding program of the school, in terms of allowances, even in terms of psychological support, psychological and social emotional support from teachers in school. So when the schools closed down because of the pandemic, these students, the young members of the indigenous community in Visayas, they felt the effect because a lot of them do not have access to what the school has been providing them. So again, even at this time of the pandemic, let's not forget the students who belong to the margins, to the marginalized communities of our society. So they are the most vulnerable students, and again, because they receive support from the school. When the schools close down, they're the one who will be less likely to receive again support and extra services that they need, especially when they belong to the marginalized communities in our society. So what are we trying to say right now? Maslow before Bloom. At the beginning of the pandemic, we spoke about Maslow before Bloom. Before we continue learning, before we resume teaching and learning, before we ask our students to study again, let's ask our students if they are okay at this time of the pandemic. Of course, you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you look at this pyramid there, physiological needs are at the bottom, and it's very, very important. Do they have food? Do they have shelter? Do they have clothing? Do they have access to the most basic human needs, right? Safety. Are they safe from the virus? Are they living in a community where there is a widespread, infection of the virus? If they are living with someone who have been infected, how are they being supported also? So this idea of making sure that they are safe, that they are okay, that they are getting food, that they are safe, that they are secured, and they have a sense of love and belonging in their community. This is the first thing that we need to ensure with our students. The context, why are we talking about Maslow before Bloom? Before, there was a rapid transition at the beginning of the pandemic. there was a rapid transition. I know that there were some schools and universities which did not have much time to prepare. So what happened was that they went straight. They said, let's go distance education. We will do online learning. There were some schools, unfortunately, who failed to consider the context of their students. Everyone was so scared. Everyone was locked down at their houses. When we had the community quarantine, the enhanced community quarantine, there was a lot of anxiety. We were so scared. I, for one, had my own experience of being scared. So because the schools, the teachers did not were not given enough time to to transition to distance education, there were some problems that were encountered. You've heard, for example, in higher education in the Philippines, there were some college and university students who wrote to their university or college presidents or deans about the struggles that they have. So they do not have access to the internet. They don't have access to good learning devices at home, and all these things will just piled up with their anxiety and their fear that they might be the next one who will be infected with the virus. So that caught us off guard, to be honest. And what we're doing right now is, hey, before we do that again, before we fall into that same mistake, what we want to happen is that we prepare ourselves. First, we prepare our students. We ask our students if they are okay and ready to study, right? And one aspect that we need to give importance to is what we call a social emotional learning, or SEL. Social emotional learning. This is a definition from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or the CASEL. Okay, it's a U.S. based organization. It's an international organization that focuses on social and emotional learning. For social emotional learning, it is defined as how children and adults learn to understand and manage their emotions, set goals, show empathy for others, establish positive relationship, and make responsible decisions. So if you look at the chart that I'm showing right now, the diagram, you would notice that social emotional learning really focuses on how students really manage themselves. This is not even for academic learning only. It's about being prepared for life. It's about being a person, right? So there is a big challenge right now. How do we get our students still to develop social emotional learning skills, even if they are, especially if they are at home and learning at a distance, far away from their teachers? So self-awareness is very, very important. Self-management, okay, social awareness, relationship skills, and even responsible decision making. All of these are the different areas that we want to focus on in terms of social and emotional learning. So again, simply, social emotional learning skills help our students to understand and manage their emotions, so set goals, show empathy for others, establish positive relationship, and make responsible decisions. Why are these very, very important? They are non-academics but skills, but they are lifelong learning skills. These are essential skills that will help our students. For example, empathy. Empathy is a very, very important skills right now. In order for you to understand the culture of other people, in order for you to understand a problem at hand, you need the skill of empathy so that you can feel what other people are feeling when they are undergoing this problem that you're trying to solve. Um, so that you can respect the culture of other people while they're doing this kind of tradition and practice. You put yourself in their shoes, in their position. So that's empathy. Establishing positive relationship. This is very, very important because in real life we expect our students to collaborate and work with other people, right? So we say collaboration is very, very important. We say it's not just collaboration, even establishing positive relationship is very, very important. And then look at it, making responsible decision. These are lifelong learning skills that we need to teach our students as early as in their kinder or pre-kinder. Okay, so the question is, how do we develop this at this time of the pandemic in distance education? Okay, so as we prepare for the new school year, which is about emergency remote or distance learning and teaching, it's very important that I just want to share to you, when we wrote the article, we look at the UN Commission on Refugees, okay? UN High Commission on Refugees. So they have an emergency handbook that tells educators, that discusses how to handle continuity of education or education continuity for refugees who have been displaced or who have encountered school closures because of what's happening in them. The first one is there should be an emergency protocol to provide immediate physical and psychosocial protection. This is very, very important. That's why we're saying Maslow before Bloom. Before you can even jump into learning, you need to make sure that the students, that the learners, they're physically and psychosocially protected, okay, that they are okay. Physically, which means that there's access to food, there's access to the basic needs, right? For living. Psychosocial, we need to process them. We need to debrief them, especially of what's happening, the negative things that are happening around them. And then the second part is a safe and quality education during and after an emergency. So the next part is we now plan how can we ensure that there is still high quality education that is safe at this time of emergency. The emergency right now is the pandemic. And then when we're ready with step 1 and step 2, we are now in step 3. Step 3, which is education that provides a sense of continuity. We are now, while we are not in the old normal that we have experienced, at this time around, we want to ensure that there is still a sense of education, a sense of continuity in the different modes or modalities that we have chosen depending on the context of our students. So right now, we're doing Maslow before Bloom, right? We're ensuring that they are okay. So once they are okay and they are ready, we now proceed to Maslow and Bloom. What does that mean? Maslow and Bloom means that we build and sustain social emotional learning skills, sense of safety and security in the students. At the same time, making sure that the Bloom part, the learning part, it's also sustained for in our students. So how do we do that? We need to encourage and support students to continue learning. So Maslow before Bloom, when we were trying to cope with the pandemic, right now we are dancing with the pandemic. The pandemic is still with us, but we said that education must continue, and we're looking for different ways or different modalities to ensure that education continues. So we have Maslow and Bloom. So as we dance with the pandemic in education, we want to say we are sustaining Maslow. We want them to feel safe and secured. They have access to the basic needs that they need to have a good daily living. But at the same time, we are sustaining and maintaining a good learning education for them. So Maslow and Bloom. At this time around, if you went to my lectures a few weeks ago, you would hear me say that at this time around, maybe the point of education is not just to tell our students to continue achieving this, and that, getting this honor and that. It's not about honors. It's not about grades right now. For me personally, the idea is we need to sustain Bloom. Bloom means learning. So we need to encourage and support our students to continue learning at this time of the pandemic. They don't stop learning, because if they stop learning, I don't know what will happen to our students. But instead, Maslow and Bloom will sustain both areas, because in the end, they are the two sides of one single coin. They cannot be separated. Of course, at some point we were starting with Maslow. with making them feel secured. But then in the end, we also realize that they need to be together. We cannot go do away with this and then leave the others. No, no, we cannot do that. Instead, we need to realize that these are two sides of one single coin. So the next part is, since we said that we need to sustain both Maslow and Bloom, we need to sustain both safety and security, a sense of readiness of our students, and then the sense of encouraging them to continue learning. How do we now enable that in distance education? The first part really is to design for relationship building, grit, and resiliency. It's to add them in our curriculum, to make sure that they are added in the program of the school. Okay, just a quick definition that this time around. Relationship means connections, making connection, establishing connection, bonds, having a sense of belonging, having and being part of a positive community. This is what we mean by relationship. It's our connection. It's not just relationship between teacher and the student. It's also their relationship with their classmates and friends, even a relationship with their family. All right. So another idea that I want to focus on, it's called grit. Grit. I'm pretty sure that you've heard about grit. Grit is about having the passion and perseverance to continue working on aiming for long-term goals. Grit is not simply about making sure that I achieve this at some point. But grit is also about teaching our students to understand that at this time of the pandemic, they continue if they're passionate about something, they don't stop learning, they don't stop working on it, that they continue to persevere, even even if they fail along the way. At this time around, a lot of teachers are really focused on grades. How do we grade this? How do we assess this? How do we measure the achievement? It's okay that we are discussing that. An episode Last episode we talked about assessment. More than the assessment, we need to teach our students not to give up. So if they don't understand this, if they failed to do this project, they failed in this quiz, we need to remind them that that is not the end of everything. Grit is telling us and telling our students that at this lowest point maybe of our life because of the pandemic, we need to continue with the idea of persevering. We don't stop. Just because we failed doesn't mean that we have to stop. Okay? Failing is part of learning. So it's important that we teach our students about grit. Grit tells us that it's okay to commit mistake. We learn from it so that we can be better. All right. Another important thing is term or idea is resilience. A lot of our students right now, this is something that has been romanticized. I just want to be real right now. You've heard about the articles. If there's a typhoon, if there's a big national problem, and we always say the Filipino is very resilient. We always say that. But what does resilience mean? Resilience means it's the ability to bounce back. Okay? It's the optimism to keep bouncing back from failure. That's why grit and resilience always go together. Grit and resilience always go together because in grit, it tells you that it's okay to commit mistake, but resilience will tell you that despite the challenges that you have, we have the ability to bounce back from failure. But the real talk here, my side commentary is that we've romanticized resilience, that we fail to ask the big system around us that we're experiencing these challenges because some people are not helping the community. Those in leadership are not doing what was expected of them. So most of the time, if there's typhoon, if there's flooding, this could have been, how do you say that? this could have been prevented if this was built. And yet people in government would say, they did not have much budget, they did have not they do not have much time to do this and that, and then this disaster happens. And then you would read, because of the resiliency of the Filipino people, they were able to surpass the disaster, and they're now back with a lot of positive outlook in life. That's good. That's good. But the danger here is we're sometimes romanticizing resilience. Resilience does not mean not asking accountability from people who should be doing these things. We should still ask for people to be accountable of the expectation for them, but we don't romanticize resilience, okay, or the idea of being resilient, okay. So relationship, grit, and resilience. How do we do this now? The big reminder is, and this is, I want you also to reflect inwards and ask yourselves, how have you designed your program, your curriculum in your school, or maybe the modules? Are they academically focused? Are they focusing on academics? Ask yourselves if you have areas of social emotional learning there. Are there areas in your modules that ask the students how they are? Are there opportunities or avenues, maybe if you're doing online distance learning, to check in with your students? If all of your plan has been focused on academics, don't worry, because this has been the trend. A lot of us are doing this for the first time, doing distance education for the first time. So our focus is on getting the academics right. The academic part should be perfect. The student should be learning well in distance education. But we also want to remind ourselves that at the academic part is just one half of the whole education program that we are offering to our students. We have character education, we have formation. So therefore, under these non-academic things are the social emotional learning, skills development. Ask ourselves, have we prepared for that? Have we planned for it? If not yet, then this is the time that we remind ourselves that we focus on that also. So to do that, we need to establish the idea of community, connection, and relationship. All right. So what we need to do is to build relationship, okay, and to make sure that we sustain a positive, respectful, and safe online community. For those doing online distance learning, we have what we call an online community, right? So what do? We want to build relationship by building or sustaining a positive, respectful, and safe online community. You know that the online world, that the internet could be very, very scary, right? We know that there are a lot of negative things out there, and yet we're using the internet as a tool for learning. So we have an online community. So as educators, one thing that you need to do is to make sure that there is a very positive, respectful, and online community. How do you do that? If you have a learning management system, then you make sure that there are behavior protocols that they need to follow. If you're doing video conferencing, for example, you want the video conference to be a safe place for students to discuss their ideas, to share their thoughts, their emotions. Then you need to put in place protocols to ensure respectful discussion, right? Um, Teachers, we want to create opportunities to build relationships in online community. So we don't jump to lessons all the time or immediately. We need to ensure that our students know each other, that they know us, right? So consider your intention. If you want to build relationship, if you want to build a sense of community, this is easier. I think if you're doing online distance learning, this is something that you could do immediately. So if you want to build a relationship or open lines of communication, teacher to individual learners, it could be email, back channel apps. Like for example, we're using Schoology in my school. So we have Schoology messaging. So it's a feature where that inside our learning management system, we can email our students, and our students can email us. um, teacher to and among learners, this is what I've been telling a while ago. You can schedule video conferences to ask them how they are, not to deliver lectures. If you're delivering lectures via video conferences, you can just give them a short a video or article where they can read what you will lecture. Instead, make use of video conferences to ask the students how they are. You could also have asynchronous discussion forums where you focus on processing their emotions where you can focus on asking how they are. So you can have online video conference protocols or discussion protocols. You can also build relationship with the parents who are supporting the students at home. So what you can do also is to give an opportunity for your parents to message you, so via email or maybe parent teacher conferencing, parent teacher conference. So you could do that in video conference. Some of you will ask, Sir Jim or Mr. Toscano, what if we are not doing online distance learning? And we're doing other modalities that will not allow us to go online because our students do not have access to the internet or do not have access to learning devices. It's okay. There are other options. My mother, for example, is a public school teacher. My sister is a public school teacher, and they're doing print-based modalities of distance education. So what they plan to do is to give their cell phone, no, not their cell phone, their cell phone number, so that people can contact them. Their students can contact them if they have problem, if they have questions. The teacher will also get the contact number of their students so that they can. It's just one way also, two way that the teacher could also ask how the students are. Okay, so the first idea really is to establish some means of communication. A lot of you would say, what if we have students who don't have access to these kinds of technologies? It's okay also. If it's safe, what you can do is to visit them if it's allowed, if it's okay. I know, for example, that there are some provinces in the Philippines who have devised a way for teachers to visit their students, especially the most vulnerable students. Visit them, ask them how they are. At some point, this is okay if if and only if you they are allowed to do it, okay, or the government allows for some movement to happen. So we just need to make sure that we are not violating some rules when we are visiting our students. However, it's also possible to do that for the students. Okay, so video conferences, checking in with students. It could always start with finding out how they're feeling. If they're feeling bad, or if they feel stressful, for example, you can ask, okay, what is stressing them? What is causing the negative feeling, or the unnecessarily or negative feeling that they have right now? So you can ask them what's stressing them or what they seem to stress about. So things like that. It could start with this. The conversation could start with this. Okay, so video conferences, calling them, visiting them, it's one way. I have a teacher in school who has made use of Padlet, for example. If you have attended the different sessions or episode that I have, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Padlet in terms of using it for a strategy in the classroom, like visible thinking routines, KWL chart. What my teacher has done. So this is Jerome Jaime. So thank you, Jerome, for sharing this. What he did was to actually use Padlet to support learners. The compass points visible thinking routine. You could also use that as a tool to process the students, how they're feeling, their expectation, their stance, or what they feel, or think about something, what worries them, and what they need. So you can use on online tools. This could be an asynchronous activity for the students. This could also be a back channel for students to share their thoughts. So only use this when you have access, when you and your students have access to the internet. Okay? Positive reinforcement. I have another teacher. Her name is Celine Estaris. So thank you for sharing your idea, Celine. So Celine, what Celine does is to make use of Class Dojo. Class Dojo is it's a very colorful. It's for children, it's for kids. They have little monsters, avatar, and what teacher can do is to give them badges if they've done something positive. It also allows the teacher to give students feedback on what they need to work on. So for example, you can see on the screen, there are badges for being cooperative, helping others, being on task. So what you can do is you can also change, depending on what you want the students to do. You can also change the different badges, the name of the badges that you will be giving to the students. Again, this is online. What if you have different modalities? You can always have your own badges printed, and you can give this to your students if you get to see them, or maybe if you don't get to see them, you can give it to their parents. It's like, if you're teaching in the kindergarten, diba, you have the, how do you call that, the stamp, the stars. Maybe you can print out some certificates or maybe some badges, and then you can give those for the students, to give them a sense of success in terms of finishing this module, this print-based module or something. You can always be creative in giving different ways to give positive reinforcement to your kids. All right. Another thing that you can do is this one, journal writing. I, for one, would say that having a journal really helped me cope with what's happening. Even before the time of the pandemic, I remember when I started creating my journal when I was in high school. So when I was in high school, and then I went to the university, in college, I got to learn to live independently. So I live in a dorm, and I was alone. My parents were, back in Abra, for example. And what kept me through the different difficult days or episode that I had was journal writing. So I got to learn how to use journal writing as a way to manage my emotion. Sometimes it's hard to speak to other people, so a lot of us would find it very, very helpful to write our thoughts in journal. So what you can do to your students is, instead of just printing modules, academic modules, why not ask them to maintain their journal? You can have this. These are some example of prompts. You can make your own prompts also. For example, if you want the students to talk about what their favorite part of the day, when they are in lockdown, when they were at their homes, they cannot go out. So how do they spend their days, for example? So you can ask them to write about those things. Take 2 moments I'll never forget in my life. Make a list of 30 things that make you smile. There are a lot of prompts. If you go online, you will see different prompts, journal prompts, that could help the students, not verbalize, but to bring out their thoughts, and write them in journal. So it's very therapeutic. It helps us a lot. It will help the students a lot to process their thoughts if they write it. A lot of psychologists, for example, I have my guidance counselor, the guidance counselors of our schools would even ask our students to maintain a journal so that they could, express themselves, not just verbally to others, but even in for their own sake also. So that is something that you could do to have journals. Um, this is one of my favorite. It's called Rose Thorn Bud. How do I make use of this? It's like a journal also. So rose is a highlight, a success, a small win, or something positive that happened on that day. So when I ask my students to do some journal, I just tell them, we can do rose, thorn, or bud approach. So rose is a highlight, success, small win, or something positive that happened. Thorn is a challenge they have experienced, or something that that students can use more support with. So it's a challenge maybe. And then bud is new ideas that have blossomed or something that you are looking forward to knowing more about or experiencing. I love the rose thorn bud because it gives a sense of, it's very creative. At the same time, it's very direct to the point because it could be very, very visual, and will help our students understand more of what they can do to process their experiences. Okay. You can do something like this is by Mindful School, so you can visit Mindful Schools in the internet. They have their own website. I've gotten this idea from them. So you can arrange, you can have this kind of journal prompt or um, journal, an organized way of doing journal for your students. You can put this in your module so that you can don't just focus on the academic part. So rose, thorn, and bud. Okay, so the questions are also there. You can explore this on your own. Letter writing. Oh, this is what I love. Oh, what if you're not doing online? You're not doing online distance learning, and you still want to build relationship and connection about your with for your students. So they want to build relation. You want them to build relationship with their classmates, their friends, or maybe even you as a teacher. But physically, they cannot visit each other. They cannot go to the same place together. What you can do is to do pen pal body system. You can assign them people that they can write with to using snail mail. So this is very interesting because since we cannot go out, we don't have access to the internet, for example, we're now using snail mail. And then we can have this delivered. I don't know how we can have this delivered. Maybe you can find a way to help the students deliver their letter to their classmates or to their friends. So letter writing is one important thing. You can devise this so that everyone gets to receive and write a letter also. Okay. Um, what else? So the big some just important big thoughts, big ideas right now. We need to build also in their curriculum. What if we ask the students to do meditation or mindfulness? In our school 3 years ago, we've started with what we call as the mindfulness exercise, so that even before our students start their class, they get to do some exercise that will calm them down. And we also let our students, we teach our students to name their feelings. It's very, very important that students know their feelings, because if they can name their feelings together, then they would be able to process and express themselves. So don't forget, even when we're doing distance education or maybe face-to-face education, let's be mindful. Maybe the next frontier, the next part, if we're doing well so much with the academics, why not focus on the non-academics? Build meditate into curriculum, meditation, mindfulness exercise, even naming one's feelings exercise also. Other ways, the more formal ways of supporting our students, we can have online counseling or tele-therapy, where if you have a guidance counselor or maybe someone who could speak to your students, you can do that. Peer interaction via online conference, video conference, or maybe writing letters, just like what I've said a while ago. Academic support is very, very important, especially for our students who might be at risk of failing or not being able to cope with the demands of the pandemic. So what else could we do? For some schools, like some Catholic schools or religious based schools, you can do spiritual formation activities, whether it's online. You can always have those kinds of things. So just find a way. If you're doing print-based distance education, but you want to include some printed activities that are non-academic but will help the students cope with the pandemic, you just need to find a way to communicate your goal, and of course let the students understand what's gonna happen. Um, as for teachers, us teachers, we need the skills. Okay, the skills of empathy, flexibility, and adaptability skills to make sure that we accommodate our students. We need to also make sure that we balance the sense of personal care and accountability for our students. We've talked about this so many times: empathy, flexibility, sense of personal care, and accountability. I will not discuss this anymore, but it's very important that we have personal care for our students, even if they're not, even if they're far from us. But we also want the students to practice responsibility when making decision. Like for example, whether they submit their requirements or not. Come on, honesty and integrity on their side. But we need to make sure that they have a sense of accountability and responsibility for the decisions that they make. Okay, and lastly, the home is a big partner right now in building this idea of support for social emotional learning. The home plays the very, very important role right now. The home is the center, is the heart of learning right now. The students are at their home. It's now the heart of distance learning. It's the heart of education. So what we need to establish is a better school home partnership. If before, there are parents who will not come to you, they will not visit you. You need to call them up and build communication with them. It's very important that they need to that they get to realize that they are playing a big role in the education of their kids. So right now we need to establish better home and school partnership. Um, so what can we do? Maybe we can speak with our parents. We can speak with our parents, trained parents. A lot of you would always say, what if our parents do not know how to give feedback? Our parents do not know what to do in distance learning. They don't really know what they're going to do at this time of the when we're doing distance education. I know that there are some schools, there are some divisions and districts who have created an orientation where they met, of course, following safety protocol, and asking permission from the local government. They were able to train their parents to become a support, to become a big support to their kids at this time of distance education. So while we say that our parents might not be prepared to do this, there's always a way to help our parents prepare for their big role right now. It could be as simple as gathering them. If they don't have internet connection, if you have internet connection, you can do an online parent teacher conference or parent orientation. That's still possible. If you cannot do online, if you don't have access, ask permission maybe from the local government if they will be allowed to meet you maybe in a safe place. I know that that's very possible because I've seen news about other schools in different provinces doing that. Okay. Um, of course, we need to teach our parents to go beyond asking the question, "How are you feeling?" Maybe we can teach the parents to ask different areas also. Like for example, they can ask question about the growth of their kids, what they have achieved at this time around in their module, what they have learned a skill, or maybe what is their goal, what they would like to be at this time around. Or maybe parents can ask what engages their kids, what makes them happy, what do they enjoy about their learning, about being a student. There are different areas that they can ask with, or maybe they can formulate questions. It's just a matter of telling the parents that they can also focus on different things. Okay, so some questions, maybe you can give the parents some questions. It's very interesting because we're also training the parents to make good conversations with their kids. And let's be honest, I for one have experienced that. I talk to parents and they would ask for help on how they can communicate with their kids better, and it's okay for me because when I tell them that they can ask these questions, I feel happy because they have really expressed support for their kids, right? They really express that they want to play the bigger role expected of them in the life of their kids. So that's okay. You can always help the parents also. So again, what we want to happen is we want to create a safe physical and emotional environment by practicing 3 R's. Reassurance. Reassure them that they are safe, that they are okay, that they will be secured. We build routines for them. So when you do distance education, think how can you help your students build routines at home? Will you be giving them a schedule, but a schedule that is flexible? And then, of course, the idea of regulation. We need to teach them how to regulate their emotions when they feel scared, when they feel anxious, when they feel down, when they feel frustrated. We need to teach our students, help them make sure that they manage themselves. This is the idea of social emotional learning. It's really managing emotion, expectation, and coping with what's happening around. Okay, so at this time around, again, the last thought that I want to give to you is we need to increase children's self efficacy, which means having a sense of agency and control. This is the big idea. One realization that I have, the education that we have right now at this time of the pandemic, teachers do not have much control of what their students or learners are going to do because they are at home. So it's a big reminder for teachers. There are some teachers who want to control their class because if they can control their class, they seem that they can teach well, that their kids are following them. At this time around, we have to realize that we don't have much control over them. What we can just do for our students is to encourage them learning, give them these guidelines so that even if they are far from us, even if they are at home, we trust and we know that they can make decisions for themselves. Of course, developmentally appropriate understanding for this. If the students cannot make decisions for themselves, we talk to the people who are close to them, who are with them in the same place. Those are their parents. So again, it's very important that we build or involve the parents this time around. Okay, and with that, I end my short sharing discussion about building social emotional learning and supporting our students at this time of the pandemic. So we're not just talking about academics anymore. We're also talking about maybe character education, formation, however we want to call it. And it's very clear that we need to go beyond also the academics of our students. So right now, I'm now gonna focus on the questions that you have. And of course, thank you so much for the kind words that you have. I think we've really learned a lot from our experience. I've been learning. If you could see, I have eye bugs right now. It's been a couple of weeks that I have been sleeping late because I've been really working on. I'm one of those people heading the online distance learning program of our school. So, it's very challenging at this time around, but I'm very happy to be here to be sharing with your thoughts. Okay, I'm just going to read some questions that we have. So, I'm going to scroll down. There are a lot of things that see here. So maybe you can resurface your questions again if you have asked your questions earlier. Let me just go through. I will also read some of your thoughts and ideas or insights so that we can share them to the big community. Right? Mary Grace says, I'm having a hard time dealing with some of my students calling out for an academic freeze. Maslow before Bloom, yes, because they think education is not a basic thing. We need to understand when we say academic freeze, what does that mean? Is that a permanent freeze? Is that a temporary freeze? If that's a temporary freeze of education, we need to understand why we're doing academic freeze. If we advocate for academic freeze, for example, what are the reasons? Because there are a lot of people who would say we want academic freeze to give time for teachers to prepare, to give parents time to cope with the demands of education and even of the students. We need to understand the reason, and we need to make sure that we are very clear with our goal with doing academic freeze. If academic freeze is just it's a temporary, like for example, we freeze academic for 1 month, we do not go back, is that what we mean? Or do we mean 1 year of academic freeze? If it's 1 year of academic freeze, that will have a repercussion. It's a domino effect. For private schools, for example, there will be teachers who will be out of employment, right? How about even in the public school? What would happen, right? Will the teachers continue to receive salary? Those are the things that we need to ask. For those industries that depend on education, for example, like books or papers or materials, what's going to happen to them? Right, if we think of academic freeze, we also want to think that there is an education sector, a big sector that will be also affected when we do this. So we need to be clear by what we mean by academic freeze, and when we do academic freeze, what is our how will we catch the big education sector who that will be losing employment and jobs also. So that's one thing that I need to process also at this with the idea of academic freeze. Okay. Um, Rose says, this is an insight from Rose, Rosemary Byron. Due to the situation we are in today, the quality of education is really at stake. Knowing that not all students are capable of things necessary for the new setup of teaching and learning process. Yes, that's very, very important. That's why the job of educators, the job of the school community, and even not just the school leaders, not just the education leaders, this should be a problem of the whole community, the local government unit, the national government, to make sure that no one's left behind. Right? At this time around, if there are some problems, I hope that we can foster partnership with the local government, because we will be needing their help. Because the education of these children is not just the job of the teachers and the principals, okay, or the Department of Education. We need to involve everyone. Okay, so what else? Any other? Okay, Marie Anna Flor has this question. What can we do as teachers if our students are not ready yet for the kind of learning we have this pandemic, blended learning? Again, if they are not ready, number one, when you speak of not ready because the students do not have access to the modality. Here's the thing. I hope that our schools have chosen the modality of distance education that is accessible for our students. I think the main challenge right now is when we choose a modality that is not accessible. For example, I just want to be just straight here. If you have chosen online distance learning, I hope that when you chose online distance learning, you actually asked if your students have access to learning devices. If your teachers have access to learning devices, both your teachers and students have access to learning devices, and even the internet, a good internet connection. So if you are not ready, ask yourselves, what are you not ready of? Is it because you're not yet done with your modules, or your students do not know what to do? Then find a way. Find a way for your students to be ready. I just got shocked. There was a big thunder, a strong thunder that just came in. So yeah, I was quite surprised with that. So if you're not ready, ask yourselves what are the areas that you're not ready with, so that you can focus your efforts. Okay? And again, getting ready is not just the job of one person, it's the whole community. So if you're not ready with this, and this is an issue for you, ask yourselves, how can other people help you? Help you so that you will be ready. Okay? Shirley Diozon asks, what is the best move of a teacher if in the mid of the school year, the student tell us that they will not continue their studies? Number one, ask why. It's always important that there should be a dialogue. Ask why they will not continue, that they will not push through. if you could list the reasons, and if you could tell the student you'll find a way to take off, to remove those reasons, then that would be good. All right. So when your students say that they cannot continue, I hope that you don't just stop there. I hope that you ask the reasons why they cannot, they do not want to continue anymore. And if you are clear with the reason, if they're clear with the reasons, I hope that you find solutions to the challenges and issues that they have concerning continuing education. You don't have to answer the issues on your own. Maybe you can ask your school leader to help you. Maybe you can connect with other people to help you find solution for the problem of your students. All right. So those I have some very good insights here. Um, Jocelyn Galonia says collaboration of teachers and parent in social emotional learning and teaching learning process. Yes, parents are, it's their role is very important in the education of the children. The education of the children is not just the job of the teachers. Parents should be involved also. Okay. Some of you says you like the rose thorn bud style. I also love it. I also love that approach. I also ask my teachers to use that in their classes. So please feel free to use it. It's very engaging. It's very wonderful. It's a wonderful use for in education right now. Dennis Deason says, asks, can you suggest best practice approach for parental involvement in delivering problem? What do you mean by best practices? Do you want to involve them? Involving them means opening your line of communication to them. So make sure that they can contact you, make sure that they can speak with you, make sure that they know what they're supposed to do. If they're going to pick up the modules at this time of the pandemic, make them understand their role. If they're going to do feedback giving with their kids, especially for the young ones, make sure that you are clear. This is what I think. This is what we need to understand. Parents will not know what they're supposed to do. Even if we communicate, for example, we tell them, oh, parent, mother and father, or mommy and daddy, you are expected to give feedback to your children. Tapos na. That's it. Told them that they are expected to give feedback. Some parents will not know how to give feedback. So it's very important that you are very clear with how are they going to do it. So if you expect them to give feedback, maybe you can give them some tips on how to give feedback. Okay? So you do not just tell them, you do not just tell them what they are supposed to do. You also help them understand what are the procedures. Maybe you can give them some prompt or sample questions or some lines that they can speak or tell to their kids when they are doing some follow-up or feedback. So it's very important that you specify and you help the parents on what they are supposed to do. Okay. Neil Edward asked, or if you have some best practices, I don't want to monopolize the idea. So if you have some best practices there, please type in the comment your best practices so that we can share to each other. I don't want to monopolize the questions or the answers to the questions. I also would like to learn from you. So please make sure that you type in if you have some ideas to help the some of our friends or question or who are asking the question out here. Okay, so Neil Edward Kalida asked a question. What is the best way to have a good relationship with your new students, especially we are now in distance learning? You know, if you are meeting, of course, right now we will be meeting new students. So before you dive into your lesson, reserve maybe a session a day just to get to know them. What we do in our school, for example, is we don't do lesson immediately. We devise some activities so that we get to know each other, right? You could be very creative with, it's like your icebreakers, for example. You can be creative of how the students could introduce themselves. You can group them also according to their to what they like, to the likes and dislikes, things like that, just to make sure that there is a sense of connection among them. So hopefully you don't dive into the lessons immediately. You form communities. Maybe schedule a video conference where you can say hi to each other, things like that. If you're not doing an online distance learning and you're doing print based, maybe you can already start by giving out your cell phone numbers to them so that they can call you, they can give you a message. You know, our students love to do messenger. They have chat groups in messengers, your GCs and messengers. Why not create a group chat for your students? Why not be creative? I one for example, because we do one-to-one iPad learning in our school. I know that when I was teaching, but this is face to face, I would ask them to take a picture of themselves, and they would write and you know, make a creative description of who they are using three adjectives or things like that. You can be very, very creative. So always make sure that there are ways, that there are some opportunities for you to be able to let your students connect and know each other, and even you. Okay? So those are some ways of doing that. Um, my eyes are just itchy, sorry. What else do we have here as question? Joy Lecture asks, can you please explain to me what method to be synergistic between individual learning and cooperative learning? I don't understand much of the question, but I do hope that I'm getting it. How do we balance individual learning and cooperative learning? Is that the question? Well, you could always, it really depends on what you want to do. Sometimes there are learning outcomes that ask students to do things on their own, but sometimes there are big projects, there are some activities that would ask the students to do cooperative learning. Just make sure that in cooperative learning, students have their own responsibilities. So here's the thing. This is what I've learned about cooperative learning or group work. Based on our experience, we were students before. You know that a group work is so bad when there are students who pass the group work without doing anything, right? So we know that the group work activity has been badly designed if there are students who do not have something to do. They are not responsible of something very specific. So that's what I've learned in my experience as a student. You know, you have freeloaders. I had classmates who would not contribute, but because I want to have high grades, I will do everything for them. As a teacher, as an educator, what I have realized is that when you do group activities or cooperative learning, everyone should have a responsibility. And if one person do not do or do not accomplish that responsibility or contribute, the group work should not will not be perfected or will not be accomplished. So make sure that each student has a responsibility, has something to do that will contribute to the bigger group work or the bigger cooperative or group activity that you have. So please make sure that when you have cooperative learning, make sure that everyone has a responsibility to do to avoid free loaders. Okay, so I think those are the questions that we have right now. So thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate that you have been supporting me for the longest time. It's our fourth session. What I'm going to do right now is to post the evaluation link to our discussion so that you'll be able to receive your certificate. Again, we have friends who are members of Team Replay. It's okay. You can watch this asynchronously. You can watch this video on your own. Just make sure that you finish the video, because aside from the message that I have right now on the chat box where the link is there, I also want right now to share my screen where for a few minutes you will be able to see the link, the link to the evaluation. So there, Thank you so much for being with me. I hope to see you next time when we have our Edu lecture on Empower Ed YouTube channel. Tomorrow, by the way, tomorrow I have a panel that will talk about supporting students at this time around. If you look at Empower Ed Facebook, the live discussion tomorrow, Sunday, 10 a.m., is very much connected with our lecture right now. I have invited four wonderful mothers who are expert educators by the on their own on their own rights also. So please tune in tomorrow, Sunday Empower Ed channel on Facebook and here in YouTube also. We will do a live discussion. So thank you so much for being here. I will now keep quiet and give you time to answer the evaluation link. I will stop sharing this and end at around 4:25. So please do the evaluation right now. Thank you so much.